Hey everyone, Evan Kirstel. Very excited about this discussion with Cami Griffiths, Executive Director, co-founder of CTN or Community Tech Network. Cami, how are you?
Fantastic. How are you?
I'm really well, and it's a great way to start the day, learning about all the amazing work you're doing, and introducing yourself to my audience and me and beyond. Maybe start a little introduction to you before we jump into CTN. Tell us about your background and your life's work and your mission at CTN.
So, I got into this work in 2003 when I was a volunteer for the Parks Department in New York City. Prior to that, I was a graphic designer, and the work wasn't very fulfilling to me. I wanted to do something that would make a difference to other people in a positive way. And a series of activities happened where I landed on computer training. I thought I could be a computer trainer. This was early 2000s. Clearly the internet was a big deal back then, but it was becoming more and more of a big deal that without access to the internet, you couldn't apply for jobs and all of these things where I thought, well, it's just not fair for people to not have access. So my volunteer gig at the Parks Department turned into a paid position for 3.5 years where I taught hundreds of people how to use the internet and apply for jobs and had several people call me their guardian angel and I
I love
changed their
that.
lives and all these things where I was like, oh my God, this is so meaningful. So when I decided to move to San Francisco, I wanted to take what I'd learned and replicate it in the Bay Area. And it was there that I found a job at TechSoup, which is where Community Tech Network originally
Le-
started
le-
as a project.
Legendary name in internet lore. Yep.
Absolutely. This great agency has been around for probably 30 years by now, helping
Mm.
nonprofits with their technology. So I was really fortunate to get that job and that led me to learn about Community Tech Network, where I and a group of volunteers took it from a program at TechSoup and launched it as an independent nonprofit in 2008. So this has been a labor of love since then, 1 year of being a volunteer, 2 years of juggling two jobs, and then I've been full time since 2011. And I just couldn't be happier with. Well, at the beginning, it was very challenging. People were saying, it's 2008, there's a financial crisis. What are you doing starting a nonprofit? And I would say, people need access to the internet. We need to
Mm.
help them. And so I've had this laser focus on getting people online since then. And the work has evolved, which I can talk more about. And we're very fortunate now to see the landscape shifting in the direction of, hey, this is a problem. We need to do something about it as far as policy and funding. But aside from my day job, I have a 10-year-old son and a husband, and I try to juggle work and life. And I live outside of Austin, Texas.
Oh, fantastic. Well, so much to dive into and unpack here. I've been in telecom for 30 plus years in broadband and networking. I'm a total geek. And, everything is online. And, we in geekdom, tech world assume everyone is just on the internet and using the internet and has access. But of course, in the real world, that is not the case. So tell us about this mission of closing the digital divide, providing equity in terms of access, broadband access, and serving those communities and helping them not just with training, but with access and more.
Absolutely. So our work started in San Francisco. We were fortunate enough to have a partnership with the Department of Disability and Aging Services, where we're helping older adults throughout the city in their senior centers. And our work
Mm,
had been entirely just digital literacy training in a variety of languages. There's a lot of monolingual older
mm.
adults that lack any kind of understanding of how to use the internet. So that was our work prior to COVID. And then after or during COVID, it was how do we get people online at home? But how do we do that without going into their homes? And so that was a real struggle, but we figured out a way to ship tablets and provide training by phone calls and then screen share. So our work, because of COVID, dove right into devices and internet. And the internet piece is just a challenge because the cost is prohibitive for many
Mm.
people. It isn't available in some rural areas. And if you even if it's there, if you don't have a device, why bother paying for the internet? And so what we're seeing is a lot of people are mobile only, so they do everything on their mobile phone, which if you can imagine applying for a job or filling
Mm.
out a complicated government form, doing that on your smartphone might cause me personally to go crazy. That is so difficult. Any wrong button and then you've lost all of your work. So this idea that everyone should have access at home to a screen that's larger than a smartphone and a keyboard so they can properly type if they're doing something like working from home or doing education, and that the digital skills gap is always going to be there. The technology keeps changing, and I fear that we'll be around for a long, long time because we'll always be chasing that the technology innovation that's happening. But as far as closing that divide, I think we have a huge opportunity here with some funding that's coming to get that fiber laid or other kinds of affordable broadband out into areas. And with that connectivity, then you follow it up with, hey, here are the benefits of the internet. Here how we can help you utilize it. We recognize you might be afraid because you've seen and heard a lot about the internet being a dangerous place, but we want to assure you that acting safely online, you also can be video chatting with someone on the other side of the globe. You can make money from home. You can engage in a way that you never thought was possible. So just think about all the things we do online every day and what your life would be without that. So when we're teaching people how to get online, it literally changes their lives. So our mission statement is to transform lives through digital equity. And when we developed that a few years ago, we thought transform lives, that's so lofty. But we're seeing that it actually is transforming lives.
Oh, I love that mission, and that's a huge takeaway. And you talk about access to the internet not being a privilege, but a right. And I think the new Jobs Act, the Infrastructure Investment Act, $65 billion being put towards closing the broadband divide and the digital divide is a step in the right direction. What say you?
Absolutely. I've been waiting for decades for this. I mean, there was the Broadband Technology Opportunity Program in the 2009, 10, 11, 12 timeframe. And that was millions of dollars that were distributed throughout the country, not focused on some focused on broadband infrastructure, some focused on computer centers, and some focused on digital literacy. But what we're seeing now is a huge jump in the amount of funding, and that there's intentional work happening to get the infrastructure out there. And it's going to be messy. It's going to be confusing. Every state is developing their own broadband plans. And so it's state by state. And so now is the time, if you're a digital inclusion leader, or even someone who's kind of curious, like, what could I do to make a difference? Start learning about what your state is doing, what your county is doing, that there's the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, NDIA, that has a listserv to join, but really digging in and figuring out, like, how do we get our work listed in the broadband plan, the state broadband plan right now? Because once that gets funded, that plan is what is going to be funded. So next fall is when millions of dollars will be distributed state by state to pay for outreach, to pay for devices, digital literacy training, and all the activities that we know is proven to help people gain the skills, the confidence. The thing I want people to understand is that you can't just hand a device to an 80-year-old and expect them to figure it out. And in some cases, you can't also hand a laptop to a 40-year-old and expect them to just figure it out. There are some learners that need more help. They didn't have computers in high school, or they've perhaps been incarcerated for 40 years. There's all sorts of different places people are coming from. And our agency is really focused on the compassion and empathy needed to help adult learners get over this barrier, this like fear and anxiety and this idea that they're too old or too dumb to learn. No one's too old or too dumb. That anyone can get online and do the activities that will help their lives improve in quality. But they just sometimes need someone to hold their hand and to encourage them and to be a little cheerleader. So we really want to focus in on supporting those new learners who in other situations have been unsuccessful. We hear time and time again, oh, I tried to take a class, but it went too fast. And so having digital literacy trainers trained to understand that this is what the digital divide is right now, how do we help this group of people? And how do we do it in a culturally competent way? That if you're helping monolingual Chinese, you can't just run your curriculum through Google Translate and expect that to be sufficient. That we are translating it and we're putting in culturally relevant examples and websites that are in Chinese and that are interesting to our learners. So it's really cool what we've built as an agency and what we're able now to do because of the funding that's coming. So the IIJA funding is coming. It's not here yet, but there are some parts of it that people can take advantage of. So I want to make sure everybody knows about the Affordable Connectivity Program. It goes by ACP. That's through the FCC. It's a $30 a month subsidy. So for someone who is eligible, they would apply for ACP and then apply for their internet. And it's a subsidy that goes towards their bill. And many ISPs are providing a $30 a month option, so their internet is essentially free. So this is a really cool program. Any social service agency across the country really should be paying attention to this program that is part of the IIJA. But in California, there's already money being made available for older adults and people with disabilities through some state funding. So we're just gearing up for the next 6 years of being very, very busy.
Indeed. Yeah, and it's fascinating to me and sad at the same time that digital equity isn't just a rural versus urban question. In rural areas, you have some areas like the Native American tribal lands that 2/3 of which don't have broadband at all, which is shocking to think in this day and age in terms of economic development and education. And some urban areas, you may have a choice of one or two providers. So, not much competition going there.
Yeah.
So how do we, get involved with the CTA? If you're listening, if you're looking to contribute or your time, money, network in my case here, what would you suggest as a call to action?
Well, we always are interested in engaging people as volunteers. And luckily, because we've expanded nationally and we're virtual, if you're someone who has a couple hours a week to give and you want to help someone learn the basics of how to use their laptop or a tablet, you can always volunteer. We would call you a digital coach, and we have free training and we do a background check and then we place you one-to-one with a learner. And it's a really cool program. So volunteering is great. If you have other pro bono skills that you would like to donate, there's lots of ways. We're still a small-ish agency. We're just a little bit over $1 million budget. So we always like people to help out with other activities. So if there's something that you love to do and you think that CTN would benefit, you can absolutely contact me. We always welcome donations, of course. Not of equipment exactly, because we're not a refurbisher, but certainly of cash. So we're running a fund campaign right now to help us with our internal capacity, that because of all these grants that are available in California, there's an incredible need for our services, that we're offering training for nonprofits who want to help their community. So it's like a capacity building program, and we call that Digital Lift. And there's about all the counties in California now have access to funding just to help their older adults and people with disabilities get connected. So we want to scale up our work. And in order to do that, we need a little extra funding to pay for the things that will help us get from a $1 million budget to potentially a $4 million budget in the next year or so. So that's very exciting time. So we're doing a fund campaign for that. And then just spread the word. and
Mm,
help other people understand, especially policymakers, other kind of community leaders, that this is still an issue, that there are people who aren't connected. Their lack of connectivity means they don't apply for jobs online at home. They don't help their children with their homework. They're not connecting to family, and they're isolated and alone. And that just doesn't sit well with me, right? So
mm.
I'd love for more people to gain the kind of passion for this issue area that I have, and that we're working together to help as many people, because it's really pretty easy to help, and it's really, really rewarding. From, like I said earlier in the conversation, the work I did in New York is the thing that lit the fire that has kept me going since 2003. So the more fires I can light, then we can really tackle this issue.
Oh, I love it. Another area you've been looking at and involved heavily is healthcare, specifically virtual care and telehealth, telemedicine, which came to the fore during the pandemic, and was for many people a problem accessing those remote care services and having the right setup and broadband and devices to really communicate with their doctor. Even getting these appointments for vaccinations was a real problem and required, quite a lot of digital skills to kind of register for those and to find the appointments. What are you doing there to kind of blaze the trail forward to more inclusivity in digital health and health services online?
We would like to do more, absolutely. But for now, it's helping get the device, get
Hmm.
the skills. The device often has the internet, but we're helping people sign up for ACP. Once they have that, then we're showing them how to access their portal, which often requires an email
Mm.
address. And so all of those steps, if you think about it, it's all more than basic digital literacy.
Oh,
And
totally.
it's confusing. Some of these portals are not designed well, and they're not in languages other than English. So it's really a barrier for some just to get logged in and to understand, like, where do they go to open up the window for their Zoom call or for their telehealth visit. So we're doing the basic training that leads people to that. Last year or the year prior, we partnered with UCSF in San Francisco, where we called their patients, a select number of patients before their visit, asked them if they needed help logging in. And for those who did need help, we did the online, walk them through the process of opening up the portal and opening up the Zoom window. We want to do more of that. We see that being a massive barrier. In fact, people aren't going to their visits, right?
Mm.
They're foregoing their health care because they can't access it and they can't travel to their appointments. And if you don't have transportation, it's a huge problem for older adults to not be able to get around, and they can't afford. I mean, you could say, well, why don't they just call a Lyft or an Uber?
Take Uber. Yeah, right.
And then
No,
you're like,
no, it's
oh, wait, right. They need to know how to use their smartphone to do that. They need to have
yeah.
an account set up with those tools. They need to know how to enter their credit card information. So everything we think about, I hope people are left with that thought of like, oh, right, yeah, I'd need a phone. I'd need internet. I'd need to know how to use it. So the more we can do to help. And one other partner, we created some curriculum specifically for telehealth. So this is Little
Hmm.
Brothers, Friends of the Elderly. They're one of our best partners in the Bay Area. And they worked with us to create a curriculum specifically for telehealth. And so it's basic iPad usage all the way to 3 different health portals. And so we've created the curriculum and a training for trainers, and then their volunteers train their clients on how to use iPads to do their health visits. So it's a great idea. We'd love to do more of that. And but we have to recognize too that people may not be able to get connected at home. So what are other agencies doing? Like libraries. Some libraries are now investing in telehealth equipment and putting it in their
Mm.
libraries. And so having partnerships with libraries to train librarians or volunteers on how to help people use that equipment. Lots of opportunities out there.
Oh, it's so wonderful, and I love the idea of being connected to your community as one of your missions. I mean, even with the elections that just passed, I mean, individuals who are connected locally to their local, state, federal representatives, through the internet and through those communities and boards and social media apps like Nextdoor, they can be more engaged with their political representatives and participatory, and not just consuming news via cable TV. So many reasons and wonderful rationales for this digital literacy and closing the digital divide.
Yeah,
What do you
the
think?
idea that someone's consuming versus
Hmm.
producing
Hmm.
is huge, right? When you're
Right,
watching
right.
TV or listening to the radio, you're consuming. When you're on the internet, you get to be a producer,
Hmm.
even if it's just an email, right? If you can take your skill set all the way to doing something like this, what incredible power we have if we know how to use it in a way that can be productive. And these tools, there's so many of them that it's really overwhelming at first, but once you get a handle on it, it's like, wow, I can research all of this information. We once had a class where we gave all of the learners the email address to the mayor, and it
Mm.
blew their mind that they could email the mayor of San
Right, right.
Francisco at the time. And they were like, really? I can do that? And so to know that this is something that's really available to anybody, and I mean, they're not going to respond to you, but you can email them and it'll get tallied up. Somebody's paying attention to those emails. But it's just interesting what we take for granted as this becomes part of our lifestyle, and that at any moment I can just grab my phone and I can look something up and I can have a question answered, just to have that power, right? That is very powerful. To be able to analyze multiple pieces of information at one time, or watch a video that does that analysis for you, it's just really, really remarkable. So having access is motivational for politics and for voting and getting people, but it's also somewhat dangerous, right? Misinformation is a humongous problem that for new users who haven't been trained on media literacy don't know but the facts and the fictions, right? So one of the parts of our courses offers information on internet safety, cybersecurity, not too heavy because you don't want to scare people off, but they really need to know that not all the information on the internet's true, and that they have to be able to discern between advertising when they're reading a page and the content that they're reading. Because if you think about it, like they sneak that advertising in there, and sometimes you don't know that you're reading it as advertising. So that's a critical part of our training as well.
Yeah, so many pitfalls and landmines you don't want to step on. And the other aspect I find fascinating is not just the basic access setup and broadband, but the nuances of technology now are so, there's so much to on board. Things like accessibility. I mean, there's so many settings and apps and services that allow you to turn on caption, to turn on translation, to if you're hard of hearing, to actually use AirPods as quasi hearing aids. If you have vision issues, to allow for notifications via the beeping light on the phone. So accessibility on the web and on mobile is such an important issue, and people don't understand the powers that exist on the platforms to help them through any limitations or disabilities. Even if you're at home, you can use an old Apple Watch or Android Watch for fall detection and for emergency services. And even folks who consider themselves digitally savvy have a hard time navigating this world of accessibility and
Mm-hmm.
usability and user interfaces on all these devices now. And some of these are literally life-saving, life-changing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the tricky thing is knowing what the capabilities of your device are,
Mm.
and how do you set them up so that they benefit you. So one of the first things that we do in one of our courses is just talk about accessibility and how
Mm.
do you change the screen contrast? How do you
Font
enlarge
size.
the font size? Exactly. It's like, I love that little circle on some websites that has the diagram of a person, because that's like the button into all things accessible. Whoever developed that little app or add-on is brilliant. But I really appreciate the power that we have to change the visuals and make it larger. But it does you no good if you don't know that it's there. And so diving into accessibility, understanding how to use voice to text, and it is very powerful, but it's a pretty heavy leap. Like you said, even people who are tech savvy don't know how to use some of these features. So it's good to point out that they're there and that people should dig in to whatever device they have to benefit from what's just built into their device.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for sharing, the CTN vision and mission. What are you most excited about as we wrap up the year towards Thanksgiving and the holidays? What are you looking forward to most?
I have an incredible team that work for Community Tech Network and the volunteers and my board of directors. They're just very, very inspiring. We collectively don't make as much as the private sector. And so to know that people could be making more money elsewhere, but choose to work for us just really makes me very proud. But we're also invested in the work and helping people that I really wouldn't want to do anything differently or be at another position. So I'm just looking forward to starting new contracts in January and helping more people. That in the previous years, we've helped around 2,000 people a year. I'm thinking we're going to help 5,000 people next year get online. So the more we can do to get people connected, it's just the thing that gets me up in the morning.
Well, thanks so much for what you do and your service to the communities and humankind out there. And I look forward to supporting your efforts. I'll keep in touch on social media.
Thanks, Ivan. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Cami. Take care. Have a great day.
You too.